power of Castle Hate Skull. I am Hella Mark Harley. What's that? What's wrong? It's just it's the Liver King. He lied to us. He said he wasn't on steroids, but it turns out he actually was. More plates, more dates. Did a whole hour-long video exposing his emails between himself and a bodybuilding coach that pretty much prove that he was taking 120 milligrams of test, 120 milligrams of Deca, 50 milligrams daily of Winstrol, ipamorelin, ibutamorin, HGH, insulin-like growth factor, CJC, a lot of growth hormone stuff, to be honest, and I think he's overspending on the growth hormone because, talk to me. I know how to get high-quality generic growth hormone for $200 a kit. You know what I mean? It's a deal, people, is what I'm saying. But you literally can spend $15,000 a month getting 10 IUs a day of pharma-grade HGH. Is it worth it? Absolutely not. I think if you do that, you're an idiot. So the Liver King's biggest crime here isn't denying his PED use, but the fact that he's overpaying for HGH, right? Am I right? I mean, somebody tell me that's a smart use of your money. It isn't. At least if you bought Bitcoin, some of that value would still be left. So personally, I'm joking about being sad because although when I first came out and talked about the Liver King, I couldn't even justify doing a natty or not. Because I was like, this is so ridiculous. Obviously, he's not natty. And we're just going to do a Charlotte of the Week and look at, and I love that word because in Derek's video, he actually makes, he includes a portion from another guy, Zach Tellender, who has a great channel on YouTube as well. He's an Olympic weightlifter. And he goes through the definition and examples of a charlatan, right? And does the Liver King really qualifies that? And I think the argument can be made that he is, although, we can examine that later. But what I was going to say is he comes on The Fighter and the Kid, and he left me with the impression that, wow, this guy's so nice, he's so cool, he's so down to earth, he doesn't seem like a liar. And so I started to question my own interpretation of his physique. And I found myself going maybe he isn't. I don't know. And also I've realized over the past year that I really don't give a shit about whether or not people lie about being natty because I have to remember that I once lied about taking anabolics too in my early 20s and, only told the truth to a few people. And it's a big burden psychologically. I didn't like doing that, but I felt like I couldn't be open because there was such a huge stigma. There's less of a stigma now, and I feel fortunate to be in a position where that's not going to affect my job or my company or whatever. But obviously people rationalize these things all the time. And we look at people who are obviously on PEDs like The Rock, getting giant and shredded more than any physique he's ever achieved in his 20s, suddenly in his 50s. But can that guy talk about his PED use? He has no choice, seemingly, if he wants to continue to be a movie star. He has no choice but to have an outright denial and even dismiss the idea that steroids even worked on him. He'd give it the old, I tried them once, it didn't work on me. I smoked once and it didn't get me high. Okay. But there's always a reason that people do this. And so my first knee-jerk response isn't disgust or anger. It's I wonder why. I wonder why exactly he felt the need to deny his steroid use and what was going on emotionally. Was it himself? Was this something he had already doubled down on? Or was it the PR marketing team that he worked with to push him to get 1 million followers in under a year, which is part of these emails too. We see sort of pre-fame Liver King with a very conscious plan to achieve virality and internet fame with a very short period of time in mind. So who knows? It'll be interesting to come out. And one of the people that I've been meaning to talk to on the show, although he's not a fitness guy per se, he does do jujitsu. and lift weights. And we've had some great conversations on a variety of topics. So I wanted to bring him on today because we actually talked a little bit about it this morning, and he said he was going to do a video on the Liver King. But it's my good friend Jesse from the channel Jesse on Fire. He talks mostly about MMA, but on his channel Jesse on Everything, he talks about everything. So he's just a guy who I think if you don't know anything about him, check out his channel. Maybe it's for you, maybe it isn't, but he's always got a hot take. He's always got an interesting and unique take. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Jesse on Fire. Having you on today, for those people who don't know, we were talking about this morning and actually doing some testing of recording us having conversations on certain key things. And I realized this might be great to bring on my show. I really liked your take on it. And we're talking about the Liver King controversy. And I actually just became aware of a new layer to the story, but we'll get to that in a second. First off, I just wanted to sort of pose the question to you broadly. What is your take on this? And from an ethical perspective, what do you think about somebody who put himself in this position to achieve incredible viral fame while pushing a product that some people would say indirectly he's using his body as the poster, for this product? And is that misleading or unethical, or what are the rules that you see there, and how should people react to it?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually just did a video about this for my channel that I literally am looking at, like the end of the as it's uploading, and I watched the beginning of the More Plates, More Dates video just to get a feel, because Liver King is not like super on my radar. Like he wasn't super, I obviously knew who he was, but it wasn't like something I was paying close attention to. And I was watching this, and it's like, he's in a tough spot to begin with. Like if he's selling a health and wellness program for all intents and purposes, these 9 pillars, here's what you do, none of which have shit to do with steroids. They don't. It's like a lifestyle thing that he's selling. And people, it's not like he volunteered. And by the way, I'm not on juice. People asked him. They put him in a box where he had to answer, where it was like, so you're telling me that you're not doing steroids? And I would imagine, and I would say pretty confidently at this point, after what I just saw, he made a decision early on where he was just like, no, I'm not on them. And then he's trapped in that lie. And the reason why I think that is because of the one clip where he's like, people keep asking me about that. He's like, I might just do them. He's like, it's not like it violates any of my principles. Like I just do them. Yeah. And I think what he was trying to say, what he was trying to do is he was trying to back out of that lie. Like where he was, because then he would just bump a huge cycle. He would get super big. He's like, fuck yeah, I'm on roids, dude. And that way he's out of, because in all honesty, whether he's on or off steroids actually doesn't have anything to do with what he was selling. And he kind of just got trapped into this lie. And that was his way out, was like, because if he wouldn't have said that, cause he's like, I'm just thinking about doing, a little bit of poison, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, dude, to me, he actually seems like a pretty stand-up dude, especially because he said that. Like, if he would have been like, I would never use steroids, I would never be a guy that cheated like that, that's one thing. But he's like, I don't care. I think he just got trapped in the lie early on, and then he's trapped in it. He was trying to find a way out, and that actually made me respect him, which makes me not respect these fucking rats that exposed him even more so.
Yeah, that's an interesting take that you. That's a really nuanced point that you made about him not going out and leading with the fact that he's natural, because yes, you do, when you look like that, you maybe in his head he thought he could avoid that conversation, but as you're saying, he didn't make that a cornerstone of the persona that I'm all natty until his hand was forced and he made that decision. And I do consider that, actually, I hadn't thought about this before, but I do consider that in a different category than somebody who comes out and says, look at me, I'm all natural. Isn't that unbelievable? Like,
yes,
he's saying all these things, and there are people like that. And I think that, if you make that distinction, I know it's maybe doesn't matter to some people, but that actually does matter to me, because, I've been in that position before. People ask you about stuff, and it's like, I didn't come out saying like, look at me, I definitely don't take steroids. And then people are asking you, people just force that question on you, and it's still this modern day curiosity that people really want to play the gotcha with,
Yeah. It's like, dude, I mean, like you go on Instagram and they're like these, they're like these dimes that have, they're 111 pounds and they have double D perfect tits. And people are like, and like in the comments, are all like, they'll be on their live stream and it'll be like, hey, are your boobs real? It's like, you stupid fuck. Of course they're not fucking real, dude. Like, give me a break. And then like, and she'll be like, and like the cool girls are like, no, they're not real, honey.
Yeah.
But like, that's like everybody wants to like, they want to stick a finger into the like, that's impossible. It's like, yeah, it is impossible. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And so it was also interesting seeing a bunch of people ask him the same thing, because when he came on The Fighter and the Kid, it was like people gave him shit, or gave Brendan and Brian crap afterwards for not asking him. But I think that's not the really relevant. I know, right? It's like, well, do you think you're going to get a different answer from him once you've decided that? And actually, we watched a clip of him on Bradley Martin's podcast, and he actually framed the question in a way where he goes, so why don't you talk about your steroid usage? Because it was framed to us, Brendan was like, oh, Bradley talked about how he had him on, and he asked him, and he sort of admitted to it. And I'm like, I really doubt that. Let's check the clip. So I don't know what got lost in translation there, but like people play that gotcha thing where they're like, so why don't you talk about your steroid usage? And like in a way where you have to deny, like you have to be like, I reject that question in order to respond and keep the integrity of your previous statements. So we watched him wiggle out of that, and it was sort of awkward. But I guess, I don't know, my capacity and taste for like making something uncomfortable in a sort of obvious way, I mean, the boob thing is a good analogy where it's like, you really like, who are you asking that question for? If it's that obvious, then it should be obvious, and you're obviously asking in front of others, not in confidence, because it's a different thing if you were to go up to a girl and be like, oh my God, your boobs are so amazing, and I'm your friend. Can I just ask you, like, can I see them real quick? No, are they real or not? That is, it's a different question than being like, fake boobs, out in front of everybody.
It's the gotcha thing, which is and again, I mean, I don't know. I am the wrong person to ask about this, because like, you're going to be hard pressed to pull a gotcha on me. They're like, hey, have you ever had a problem with opioids? I'm like, fuck yeah, you haven't, weirdo. You know, it's like I honestly believe that if you just say things confidently and you not like pretend like you're confident, if you genuinely are just like, yeah, this is my life. There's no mud anyone can throw at you, because you're like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. Yeah. Oh, you're on steroids? You're like, fuck yeah, I'm on steroids. You think that has anything to do with my 9 pillars? Hey, go do steroids and see if you can do what I do. Geek.
Right. And that is actually a legitimate answer to respond to people with, because I think there's also a lot of confusion about like, what will certain steroids do to you? And most people underestimate the power or the proportion of that equation that's training and diet, and people vastly overestimate the proportion of the equation that's anabolics. And it was interesting to see that part of this leak was like, he talks about, to this bodybuilding coach, how many workouts he does a week. And he's pretty consistently 7 days a week, almost doing 2 workouts a day. And, CrossFit style Metcons plus West Side barbell powerlifting stuff, or conjugate training really. And his body reflects that. And I think most people simply have never trained that hard in their life for even one day, let alone years and years on end. So maybe you've experienced the same thing. And also, I was going to say, with your opioid stuff, I know we've talked about this before, but I do think that's a really cool approach. And maybe you could talk about like the freedom that's given you. I don't know when you decided to talk about this, or the conscious decision you made to bring it to your audience, but everything that I've seen in your comments is always people giving respect to it and saying, hey, this helped me. Or, I just see when you're open about that kind of stuff, it creates a positive community that can actually help people, whether they're going through it or somebody else is going through it, or, it just adds respect and integrity to you as the person creating content so people can trust you more. But,
actually, I sent a guy sent me a question today through email who's been on Oxy for a long time. And he's on like Dr. Oxy, like he has a shattered ankle and he's been on it for like 9 years or something like that. And he was like, dude, I've really been thinking about getting off. I've been watching your content, yada, yada. And I took 7 minutes and voice memoed the guy. He's a stranger. And I was just like, this is exactly what you need to do. And I put out a plan for how he can get off. He is in a very advantageous position to be able to get off pretty painlessly because he has a ready supply of pharmaceutical Oxy where a lot of people don't. And there's a lot of ways that you can get trapped into it's
into doing heroin or worse.
It's criminal. Like what unsurprisingly, if you go to a doctor and you're like, look, I have a problem with opioids, the Western doctor is going to hand you something that you're like, oh my God, yes. And they're handing you like a fucking envelope that has like a scorpion in it, dude. It's like, oh, here's your solution, dude. You're like, oh my God, thank you, doctor. And you don't even realize they just put you in a 10 times worse position because the pharmaceutical companies they do Suboxone, which is the longest acting opioid in human history, made in a lab intentionally to be so long. People can never get off of it. Never. It's like,
right. Yeah, it's a weird thing that we use like things like methadone, like we use opioids to get off of opioids, and I can't see how that's anything but just a continuation of that cycle, except putting the money, into the pharmacist, right? But that's a good point actually about, the ethics of doctors prescribing this stuff, and I relate to when you're saying you're spending 7 minutes helping this guy out with a voice note. That's actually, I've realized that's one of the most gratifying elements of my purpose and why, I'm driven to keep, talking about this stuff publicly is it is really cool. Now, I'm not dealing with people who are addicted per se, but I like knowing that if somebody asks me a question and I can set them on the right path at least, or give them more information about how to go about it, like I really feel like that's a moral obligation that I have. And I also enjoy the human connection, but like it's hard for me to think about denying somebody that, or, those are the messages that I really try to get back to because I know this is important for somebody and I know there's many ways to do it wrong. And, I'm in a position of luxury, and so are you, to like, you've overcome your addiction and can speak about it coherently and are, a success story. And I'd like to think that, I'm a success story at least in that I haven't like gone crazy with addiction, and I've experienced the highs and lows and have a message out the other side of being, moderate, least effective dose. And I can actually give the specifics and my experiences on that to help guide people rather than just regurgitating, what I read online. So, a lot of people have been wondering, Mark, is this an oak and stone shirt that you've got on? Well, actually, it isn't. But you know what's underneath it? My bare chest. Yeah, I went layers today, okay? Daddy's getting fancy. Now, if you want to get layered up this winter, because it is going to be cold probably where you're at, even in California, go to oakandstoneclothing.com. Get yourself one of these little ditties. I know a lot of people took advantage of the 40% off site-wide plus 10% more if you use code HELLA over this past weekend for Black Friday. And I'd love to hear how those purchases turned out. Please DM me and I'll feature you in my story. I know some of my friends actually took advantage for the first time. So I was really, really glad to hear that because I do believe in the product and I do think they're great, long-lasting clothes, and the quality is better than almost anything else in my closet. And I will continue to wear these clothes, whether on top of things or under things or just loosely draped around my neck like a scarf. Thank you for listening. It's pretty rare that I have a guest on that I'm talking to on this show, and I know for a fact that they're on Kratom too. Now, Jesse uses a different brand of Kratom. We won't go into that, but if you want to use the best Kratom on the market, you're going to have to go to happyhippo.com and get some of that Kratom. You're going to use promo code ThickBoy with 3 C's, and it's going to get you 20% off and you're going to try that glorious, sweet kratom. I like the shots. I always talk about it. I've tried the powder before. It's a way to get a lot in a little, but haven't quite got the dosing down correctly. So I like the fact that a shot is pre-measured. It gives me exactly what I need, and that's a good amount for me, and I stick with it. Some people say, oh, it's something that, it might have a potential for abuse. Well, not for me, because I feel good doing one, and, I've tried doing two, and it doesn't feel so great. So stick with the dose that works for you. Use responsibly. I think you're really going to enjoy it, and I can't wait to hear your experiences with it.
And the thing that, for me, it's like, I don't really even know how to describe it. It's like, you can be like people who live completely sober. I don't understand. I don't understand how people do that, dude. I really don't. Like, I've never pretended like that's what I do, because I fucking don't. But like, there's a huge, huge, huge difference between like, I do kratom throughout the day, kratom, or like, and I take this little thing that I can, so I can go to sleep, and then I party once a month like this, versus I take fucking 20 Vicodin a day. You know what I mean? Like, where I learned this from someone else. I can't remember what they call it, dude. It's like, I do. It's called harm reduction. So it's like it's a new way of thinking about like addiction. That's just like, just fuck this abstinence shit. That's like, people are just white knuckling their whole life. Because what ends up happening is it like creates this, setting in your mind where you're either white knuckle dead sober, or you're going to slide down into like deep fucked up drug addiction. Like, those are your only two options.
Yeah.
Where harm reduction is like, figure out a way to like actually do things like, it's okay to do things in moderation. Like, it's not, all that matters is that you're keeping your life together. Like, if you're on the right track, doing the things that you want, you're not doing anything that's enough that's going to seriously damage your health, and who gives a fuck? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And I do think you're right that the conversation is typically either you have a drug problem and the approach is to be totally sober, and I wouldn't be able to tell you any effective strategies that I've heard for like using in moderation. That message really is sort of ignored, even though I think that's probably a first step for a lot of people who can't afford in that particular moment to pursue sobriety with absolute intent. And when you can't afford to do that, and you still try to, and you think like, I'm going to get sober, but you don't have the resources or the ability to commit to it 100%, then maybe you feel like a failure if you don't actually achieve sobriety. So that can't help, with relapsing and making that cycle continue. But yeah, I was also going to ask you, we talked about this a little bit before, and I thought you had an interesting perspective on, speaking of the ethics of doctors prescribing opiates, knowing that this is going to be, a continuous cycle. And I know you're a guy who thinks about that kind of stuff often with an unconventional perspective. But what are the ethics to you of a guy who deliberately pursues a viral marketing campaign while denying that he's on steroids, but he is on steroids, and he's selling a supplement? Again, he's not going viral because he's like, a car salesman, or, he's a painter. This is something that there is a link, right? Even though he's not directly saying, if you take this, you'll look like me. It's sort of a wink and a nod that like, when you could, if you were more primal like me, you would do this. Do you think as part of marketing, like, we should be outraged at him, or is that fair game?
I honestly, the only way I can answer that is to say it completely depends on what we talked about, which was whether or not he volunteered, hey, I'm not on steroids, or if someone cornered him, asked him, and then trapped him in the lie.
Yeah.
Because if someone, like, if it started with someone else asking, then he gets a pass from me. And because, like I said, he was trying to back out of that lie, dude. When he says, I may as well, I'm thinking about just doing them and getting super fucking jacked. It doesn't violate any of my pillars. That's crystal clear to me. He's trying to back out of that lie.
Yeah. And when you look at that guy, because I know you're really good at reading people and it's something you pride yourself on, do you feel like this guy is a pathological liar who's been lying his entire life, or do you assume or perceive that this could be more of an isolated thing that's revolving around a societal taboo that we still haven't quite lifted the taboo off of. And he felt like he couldn't, or maybe was pressured into not admitting this by his marketing and PR team. Do you have any insight into that? Any speculation on, like, is this guy a liar?
I think that when he probably committed to that, it was before he even had a fucking PR team. Like, I bet it was like early on. And I mean, you know, I'm speculating obviously, but I highly doubt that, you know, that it was like, well, again, you know what? I don't know about that. If he got asked again, it just completely depends on what the sequence of events were. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, if it was him openly volunteering that information, then, you know, where he's like, look, and I don't ever do, you know, like, I would never dirt. That's very dishonest to me, you know, and that's it. But someone asking you a question that's not their fucking right to ask you that, really, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, there are certain things that, you know, it's like, dude, you're trying to build a business. And like I can absolutely say now, because he tried to back out of the lie, the use of steroids, yes or no, are not relevant to what he was selling, really, you know? And so it's like, I mean, is there a component to where it's like, all right, I guess there's kind of an implication that if you just eat all this liver and fucking go caveman, you could potentially look like him because he's saying that he doesn't do roids. I can see that. But at the same time, that is the entire supplement industry.
Right.
And so when he says, I may as well just do them, I think he's probably a good dude.
Yeah.
I do not like this happening to him at all. The more I saw, more I saw of him, I'm like, this is just a bunch of jealous hater rats that fucking did him wrong. I would have never, if that information fell in my lap.
Yeah.
I've had things way bigger than this fall in my lap before.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they say, well, this is a pretty big deal, but I've had things this big fall in my lap not super long ago, and where no one had it. And I didn't break it. It would have been a tremendous, it's like hugely advantageous to me and my channel. And I went the other direction, and I brought it to the person and was like, look, like, this guy wants me to put this out. I stuck him in my pocket. Like, I went with the long game, and which is exactly what they should have done. Liver King's got the world by the balls, dude. You could either expose him, you know, fuck his life up, and then I guess get, like, what did they even gain from that? Like, more plates, more dates. He's already a super successful. So, like, what do you even fucking gain?
Yeah, I don't think it's purely clickbait. I don't think he's purely driven by getting views in that way. I have to assume, if we're, you know, giving him the most charitable interpretation of his motives, that he felt ethically obligated to do that.
You think so?
Here's why I say that, because he seems like he's nerdy. He's very dry. He doesn't seem like somebody who would ever want to sort of put, like, fame, celebrity attention ahead of his own expertise. So those types of people, you know, engineer types on the MBTI personality inventory, they tend to have a sense of, like, right and wrong. Like, I have to do this, or tell the truth about something, like, even though it's going to hurt other people's feelings or hurt them. Like, the truth is something that trumps consequences for other people without necessarily being beneficial to them. Like, think of, you know, I can think of, for example, my older brother. I remember he's more of a mathematician, engineer type. Like, he has a PhD in computer science. And growing up, he would always be the guy who kind of, like, point out the elephant in the room that would, like, the people with more advanced social skills would be like, hey, don't say that. Like, don't point out the obvious in some ways, but, like, you're pointing it out because you feel like it should be spoken, and there's less in the way as far as going, I wonder how that would make that person feel, you know? So it's like almost on that autism spectrum to a degree. I'm not saying Derek is autistic, but I'm saying he's a few steps closer than some people are. And I say that as somebody on the spectrum, potentially. But it's hard to imagine that he just wanted, like, oh, this is going to be my big break. He's already had the big break. He's already been on Rogan. There's not going to be anything bigger than that. Although seemingly Rogan had a big issue with Liver King, or the last time I heard him talk about it, he was really like contemptful, towards.
He just called out the obvious, which was this guy's on juice, obviously.
Right. I don't think it's anything abnormal as far as response to him, but like, I know the Liver King wanted to get on Joe Rogan, and it's like, well, maybe he's got a chance now that it's come out, and depending on his, how he deals with it, maybe. But beforehand, he's like, I don't want that guy on here to like bullshit me for 2 hours about ancestral living. Like that was his attitude, and I think rightfully so, because when you're in that position where everybody wants to get on your show, and it's like, okay, but how about being honest first?
Joe's like, dude, if I want to bring someone on who's gonna bullshit me, I'll bring on fucking Sanjay Gupta from CNN, and I'll butt fuck him on national television. I mean, if you want me to deal with someone dishonest, bring in the fucking CNN or the Pfizer rep. That's a mistake those fuckers wouldn't make twice.
I think
the one time they're all talk about underestimating your fucking enemy, dude. They're like, why don't you hey, just send Sanjay out there, like all these Rogan listeners who aren't getting vaccinated, just send Sanjay on Rogan. It was like, ooh,
yeah, that was fantastic too. Because we do tend to, put doctors on a pedestal in so many areas. And I'm a big believer that, like, look, listen to experts, but recognize the scope of their expertise and intelligence. And, just because he's a doctor doesn't mean that he's going to be able to hold his own in debate with somebody just because you've underestimated him, essentially. But yeah, I thought that was
he seemed like a really good person too. Like I watched that podcast and was like, Sanjay Gupta is a good dude.
Yeah, if I don't know if Sanjay's underestimating him, but I think that people in general, when they refer
the
to
collective, there's no way in a million years that Sanjay Gupta went on Rogan without there having been a very, very big conversation among the big boys, like all the pharma executives and all them. There's no way. Yeah. He had a new book. But everybody knew that Rogan had said all these negative things about the jab. So like, there's absolutely no chance that CNN and pharma guys allowed him to go on. They took a strategic risk where they were like, I bet, this guy's a cage fighter podcaster. When he goes up against Sanjay's going to show him all the benefits and whatever. And it just, again, they drastically underestimated who he was going on to talk to.
Yeah, and it's that's one of the reasons I always feel like I relate to when the average guy watches Joe Rogan, it's like that is a moment for any man out there who's been underestimated, because it's like, oh, he's muscular, he works out, he spends a lot of time at the gym, he must be a fucking idiot, and that's sometimes the case, but not always.
Rogan does that on purpose too. He plays the like, oh, just a dumbbell comedian. He knows he's not that.
Right. Yeah. It's a nice out, and it's also sort of like Socratic, or like you'd hear about, I don't know if it was Socrates or Plato specifically who would refer to himself as knowing nothing, but it's like, it's this good position to take that you're like, no, I'm not an expert. I'm curious, but like, you're the expert, you tell me, and then I'm going to find holes, in your argument. So I think
it relieves a lot of pressure off of his situation, which is like, I highly doubt that he set out to be one of the most influential people in the world in regular, real issues, and that way, like, he can just be like, why would anyone be listening to me? So he can have his voice. He knows he's influencing people. And at the same time, he's giving everyone, it's like, okay, don't go jump off a bridge because I said it's a good idea. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think that's also kind of a key difference that in this More Plates, More Dates video, they start off with defining, the term charlatan, and part of it is kind of a distinction of what you're saying. Joe Rogan is continually reminding you that, like, I am not an expert in the fields that I'm bullshitting about. Like, I am just a guy who's curious about these things. And as you pass over into the territory of, hey, listen to me and good things will happen to you, right? And of course, that's a sliding scale, but like, you are a different figure at that point, a guru, a cult leader, a religious figure, whatever, where you're presenting yourself as the person with the answers. and I think Liver King's maybe low on that spectrum compared to other more dangerous gurus, but he's on that spectrum of going like, listen to me, I have some of the answers. And I think Joe Rogan, in a lot of ways, carefully excuses himself from that kind of authority, even though it can have some benefits.
I agree that he's very it's funny. It's fun. Like I hadn't really thought of that. I just said on the video that I just did, I said, I think Rogan and our base settings are so similar. It's like I agree with literally any opinion he's ever shared. I've agreed with, where I'm like, and not like in a way where I'm like, hey Rogan, tell me what to think. I mean, every once in a while he'll do a podcast where I'm like, dude, come on, like stop showing off. Like everybody knows that you're not an actual homophobe. Like you don't need to rail on Ben Shapiro and this dude over here. But like, right. But for the most part, like anything I'm like, I am totally aligned with him. And I just said on this video, I was like, any of these like guru self-help guys, it's just not my shit at all. Like I'm just, like I'm not into that stuff at all.
Yeah. That's always a red flag for me. I can get past that, but when somebody's presenting themselves like that in a really strong way and claiming to have all the answers, my knee jerk is always to like look for what they're hiding. And I do think the reason, this is what people who I've argued with about Rogan never seem to get, is they think his listeners look to him as some sort of cult leader or look to him for opinions, but it's like, no, we don't look to him for opinions. It happens that we think in similar ways because of maybe, similar experiences of like, we've done combat sports and we lift weights and we feel free enough and wherever we're at in life to kind of like agree with some of the stuff from the left and some of the stuff from the right. But I've never heard a take from where you're like, that's outlandish and ridiculous. And also
he's like one of our buddies. That's how it feels. It's like,
and he's open to changing it. He's open to changing his mind, which is a really important thing too. So before we get out of here, I just wanted to get your take on, if you were the Liver King and this just happened to you, you're sitting at your compound, your 500-acre ranch or whatever the fuck he lives on, going, this is just happening. It's unavoidable. The cat's out of the bag. The situation isn't something that can be denied, or maybe it can. But how would you go about responding to this?
How smoked is he on the emails? Like, is it for sure him?
From what I understand, and Brendan has even texted him a little bit, and I was like, was there any indication that he was like, no, this wasn't me? It was, More Plates, More Dates has basically got him because he presented the same email address, emailing him with similar questions. Like he was looking for this bodybuilding coach, but got another guy, but like in that process of searching for
same email address.
It was like, so it's like when Derek saw this email address from the guy, he checked his own inbox and was like, oh my God, he tried to email me last year, like with similar stuff. And a guy from his team did. So essentially, like just the emails on its own, you'd probably first go like, wait a second, did somebody Photoshop this? But then you'd look at the emails and be like, there's a lot of really specific information. Like if somebody wanted to pull this hoax, like they're a fucking genius at making the elaborate details seem legitimate. But in this case, there was also the nail in the coffin to me was that he was on record sort of right before he started making this big viral push, seeking the same advice with almost the same wording. So,
my gut is to just like definitely no fucking public statement apologies. Definitely not that. Fuck no, not that. If I would say, if he wants to respond, he needs to go on someone. He needs to pick someone and go on their show and have a conversation with them. Not like, don't fucking do one of those hostage video apologies. That will not go over well. That's a headshot right there. If he does that, literally regardless of what he says, headshot. His whole brand is like self-ownership, fucking put your dick on the table. So be that, dude, be that. Go somewhere where you're going to get to have like an actual conversation with someone and just go, look, dude, here's the deal. I've been living this life for 40 years. Okay. I've been in the public spotlight for 12 months. Okay. So here's the deal. Early on, like, look at me. Of course I take testosterone, but early on, you know, when people, I got cornered. I never volunteered this information. Like I didn't say I did or I didn't, but people cornered me in a podcast. They asked me the question. I made a poor decision and decided to say no. Cause I was honestly thinking about the young people that, you know, follow my stuff. I didn't want a bunch of teenagers to think they need to do this to look like me. So I said no. Then it became such a huge thing because to anybody who has a trained eye, they're looking at me and they're like, dude, he's lying. So you just keep asking and asking and asking. I've already said that I don't. So I kept saying that I don't. But the bottom line is this. I tried, you know, that this is what it is. Like, yeah, I do. But I, you know, and I'm not going to even get into my dosages, but they're not high. I take this because I believe it's healthiest for me. And I think that anybody who's 45 years old is probably going to be healthier if they do a similar regimen of testosterone, but that's up to you and your doctor. I'm not giving medical advice, and I didn't want to get into giving medical advice, which is why I didn't talk about it. Now that we've got this big like expose, yeah, I do them. It is what it is. It doesn't change the value of any of the things that I've been talking about, nor will it ever change the value of any of the things that I've been talking about. And from here on out, if people want to talk to me about what I put in my body beyond what I'm talking about in terms of supplements, I'm not going to be one of these guys that's going to talk to you about fucking steroid doses and shit like that. That's not my brand. Talk to your doctor about that. Like I talk to mine, and I'm done with the fucking topic. And then that's it.
Ooh, Jesse on fire, bringing that heat.
That's exactly what I would say.
I appreciate you coming on. I think that's a great answer and a great way to end this call. I hope he takes your advice because I agree the only way out of this and moving
Send
forward
it to him.
is for him. I will. Is for him to take extreme ownership. And we're definitely going to clip this out. And yeah, man, I just wanted to say thank you for joining, and we'll definitely get you on again very soon. And if you don't follow Jesse already, Jesse on Fire is his YouTube channel where he does.
Or Jesse on Everything.
Jesse on Everything is everything outside of MMA, and they're both fantastic channels with amazing daily content appearing on both, from what I understand. I mean, I know you have MMA stuff. I don't know if it's a daily for Jesse and Everything too, but
it has been lately.
Way. There we go. Okay, my man. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. Chat soon.
Take care.